Hello and welcome to a new day of exciting chess in this fascinating matchup between Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen, the world champion. Now yesterday Magnus was dominant, beating Hikaru 3-0, but it's a new day today and more to fight for. Let's remember, it could be a 4-game match, but if you get to 3 points, then you win, basically. So it's out of 4 games, 2.5 wins as well. And, very exciting. And this game was probably the deciding game. It was the first game of the day. And let's dive straight into the action. So Hikaru had the white pieces, and it started out with an e4, Rule Lopez. But Hikaru now meeting the Berlin opening, which is knight to f6. One of the most solid ways of black to play, and I think every top grandmaster, every elite grandmaster at least, has this move in their repertoire now, because it's supposed to be a good way to get an even game safely. And now d3. And this is one of the more aggressive moves because it actually keeps a lot of pieces on the board. The main line is where white castles, and after a forced sequence of moves, we get the famous Berlin ending. And this is, queens off, boo. I'm going to be about equal. Let's just put it that way. It wouldn't be my cup of tea. And Hikaru, being an aggressive player, not wanting to take Magnus into an ending, plays d3. Magnus develops bishop c5, and now bishop takes c6. And this basically fixes the pawn structure from an early stage, meaning that both sides have easier plans. It should be noted that Naka played c3 in a previous encounter against Magnus Carlsen. And now this is a case where black should take away from the center because the bishop can develop quickly and the queen is on this open file in the center. White castles, and now bishop g4, a very nice pin on that knight. It gets very exciting now. This is a very standard approach that white now plays, h3. And when your opponent moves the piece into what I say is your half of the board, it's often a good idea to give that piece a kick, give it a little boot, move your little h-pawn up and ask it the question, where are you going, son? Where are you going? And now the bishop keeps the pin and drops back to h5, and Hikaru plays a very brave move, being a very brave player, g4. Now this is a brave move because you're moving the pawns in front of your king, and the pawns in front of your king are your bodyguards. They're like, keep your king safe and cozy. And if you start telling your bodyguards, go on, you can nip off, go and have a meal, go down the pub, and then an assassin comes along, well, it's not good news, is it? So in this case, very risky. But the idea is if the bishop goes backwards, we force the bishop to a bad square and we've moved out of the pin, so we can simply take on e5. So this forces Magnus to sacrifice. So also very brave play from Magnus as well. And he continues with knight takes g4. Pawn takes g4, bishop takes g4, and Magnus has 2 pawns for the piece. So he's behind in material, but he's banking on this extremely strong pin there. The knight can't move because the queen will drop. And black can try to increase the pressure with such moves as f5, opening up the position, or even swinging the queen around towards the attack. So Hikaru develops and asks the bishop on c5 a question. And now, I think this is Magnus's very crafty preparation. He plays the first new move. And the first new move is bishop to e7. Now previously, bishop to d6 has been played. But after king to h1, f5, and now rook g1, white was able to get a perfectly good, probably advantageous game. But there are some very small subtleties with this bishop being on this square, as we're going to see. It means the queen has more access to come to d6 and around the angles, which could be quite useful. And the bishop also has a bit more control over the king side. So very exciting position so far. Has Magnus got enough compensation for the sacrificed piece? And here, king h1 played. Actually, king g2 would have been better. But Hikaru maybe knows this previous game where king h1 was played, and now Magnus strikes out with f5, attacking and trying to open up lines. When you're attacking in chess, you're attacking your opponent's king. The more lines you can open up towards your opponent's king, the better. And black is also trying to get a rook along that f-file, therefore increasing the pressure on f3. And one more thing, if this pawn is ever taken, now that the bishop is out of the way, unlike this variation that had happened before, white has to face queen d5, which is another option black now has. So rook g1 played, and Magnus now supports the bishop on that square with h5, another aggressive move. And here knight c3, Hikaru developing, and Magnus plays f4. And around here it looks to me that, well, Magnus is probably doing quite well because he's pushing the white pieces backwards. And this pin is incredibly hard to break. How does white ever get out of this pin? Now you can imagine this sacrifice on g4. It works a lot better when white has lost his light square bishop. Because in these types of positions, if white was able to go bishop e2, the pin would be non-existent and Hikaru would be winning easily. So it's a little pointer to remember if you want to try to be a Magnus Carlsen and sacrifice a piece, you might just look like a Wally because you've got it in the wrong position. So don't look like a Wally, be a Magnus Carlsen. My advice of the day. Not easy to do. I always look like a Wally when I try to be Magnus. And now g5. So these pawns are coming storming down the board. But the issue that Hikaru has, it's very hard for him to move. He plays knight to b1. The knight is going to try to come to d2 to support the knight on f3. But this takes quite a lot of time. Bishop c5. And now bishop c3. And bishop takes f2. So here we see Carlsen grabbing that third pawn. Knight on bd2. White doesn't even bother saving his material. He just develops. And now another good move by Magnus, queen e7. In positions like this, it's more important just to develop, to attack. Get the king castle, bring the rook over, support your position, then grab material. Had the greedy bishop takes g1 been played, then white would be able to play queen takes g1, and next move, knight takes e5, and all of a sudden, white's pieces jump out of the jacking box and come to life. So queen e7, and now we have queen to f1, removing the queen from the pin, and only now bishop takes g1. So black has gained a useful tempo by placing the queen here. Queen takes g1, and now bishop takes f3 and g4. Here they come. It reminds me of the game Space Invaders. They're coming down the board just like Space Invaders, trying to steamroller the white pieces out of the way, right towards white's king. So white must come forwards. Knight takes e5. And it's just a matter of whether these pawns are incredibly strong, and also the queen can join in the attack. First of all, rook g8 to stop knight g6. Another piece supporting those pawns. Rook to f1, and now queen to g5. Here they come. Here's Johnny. And now, well, queen to d4, threatening to counterattack with queen d7 and queen to f7 checkmate. In actual fact, it would have been a lot safer, and in hindsight better, to have played queen to h2, trying to cover the black queen from intruding into the position. And after g3, try to blockade on the light squares with queen to g2, because now white has control of these squares and is actually pretty safe. I don't know what's going on here. It's a crazily complex position, but any result would be possible. In the game, Hikaru now is ready to pounce, but it's Magnus's move first. Queen to h4 check. King to g1, queen to g3 check. King to h1, and here, typical Magnus Carlsen. There is a reason he's world champion, and if you're a junior out there, you can learn a lot by what Magnus Carlsen now does. Even though it might not work out in the game, what he does now is the best way to improve. You've got to take risks. Rather than taking a perpetual check, which would be a good result with the black pieces, first game of the day, and maybe even, you could say, hindsight always decides this, the wise thing to do, considering Magnus did not have hardly any time left, Magnus plays for the win. Now, the reason I say that's a good thing to remember, so many juniors take draws. You don't learn anything. The first lesson I got was always play for the win. You'll learn a lot more if you lose those games than you will if you draw, and it will improve your stamina and your fear factor. You'll just, train yourself to always go for the win. That's what world champions do. And he checks one more time and now plays g3. Now, this is actually the wrong way to do it. He should have played rook to d8 with an amazing concept in mind. This is stopping the queen coming here, and he was probably afraid of queen to c4. But in this position with queen to c4, threatening the rook on this square here, can anyone see the amazing move that is possible? What amazing move is possible in this position? Anyone see it? It's simply astonishing. Rook to d5, and this blocks the queen from coming into the position, and it gains Magnus that extra tempo to attack. Quite a stunning sacrifice, and the point after pawn takes d5, yes, Magnus is 2 pieces down, but he now has that tempo and he can use it to go f3, threatening queen to g2, checkmate, and after something like rook f2, g3, and those pawns will win the day. This is very hard to calculate, but this is the win that Magnus missed. Instead, he goes g3, and now Hikaru plays the very clever knight to f3. All of a sudden, there's no checkmate ideas because the knight covers h2. And after the move g2, Hikaru plays rook e1. And this position is now very, very unclear. Hikaru is ready to counterattack, and Magnus now makes the last blunder. He plays queen takes f3. Now, he should have tried b6 because this gives Magnus the opportunity to play c5 at some moment, and we're going to see why the move c5 is quite important for Magnus. After queen takes f3, it's now Hikaru's time to have a bit of fun. We can't let our opponent have all the fun. We wouldn't play chess for that reason, would we? No, no, no. So the queen slips in with a check, and the black king is just so bare. This is the problem Magnus has. Magnus also doesn't have any threats now. White is covering all of his attacking ideas. And in this case, the combination of queen and bishop, 2 pieces attacking the black king, is going to be pretty deadly. Normally 3 pieces creates checkmate, but 2 pieces against a real empty king, and when one of those pieces is the queen, can often be enough. King d8, queen f6 check, king e8, and now bringing the bishop into the game. Bishop b4, threatening queen e7 checkmate. Now, had Magnus had a pawn on b6, he could have played c5. But in this position, c5 is just met by bishop takes c5. He tries it. Bishop takes c5, thinking the king might have an extra escape square. But after king d7, queen to f7 check, well, it's now forced checkmate, and Magnus resigns. Really distraught, and this was an amazing game. Remember to like and subscribe, by the way, to the channel, the Chess.com channel. But can you see the checkmate here? I will say, if king c6, can you see how to checkmate? A nice little challenge for you. Hikaru had about 8 minutes in this position to find it. So give yourself at least 5 minutes. See if you can work out how to force checkmate. And the news of the day after this game is that there were 3 more draws, meaning Hikaru has won today. He's won the encounter, leveling the match at 1 win for Magnus yesterday, 1 for Hikaru today, going into the last day tomorrow. Make sure you tune into that. It's going to be brilliant. There's a little bit of rivalry going on between these two, as there always is, but with Hikaru doing so well streaming, he's become an absolute legend and a very followed person. Tens of thousands of people watching. Magnus had a little bit of complaints about that, as you can read online. I don't know where you stand on that. You know, it's good to have a bit of rivalry. That's what we want. We want a bit of banter. You know, if everyone's nice to each other all the time, it's rather boring. So good on Magnus for a little bit of a dig. It adds drama. But if he loses, it could be one of the first times Hikaru ever manages to beat Magnus in a match. I can't remember him doing it any time previously. So tomorrow, key game. This is the game that really broke Magnus and made Hikaru win today. Exciting stuff. I'll see you later. Do remember to like, subscribe, and take care of yourselves.